Hey, Nathan here. Welcome to the very first tutorial for the flat paddle series. And in this tutorial, we are going to create our project and work on a couple of the very short files. So we're going to combine a few stuff into one video so it's not a 1-minute tutorial coming up shortly. Okay, so we create our project first. We need to create our project and our solution and get our structure set up. Add a reference to the PGL2D library, and we will be good to go at that point. And then the two very short files we will work on is a file with just an enum, and that will hold who controls our paddle. And the second file will just be an interface, and that will make sure that our paddles use that paddle control enum that we just created. So that is the plan for this tutorial. The first thing we're going to do is work on the structure and actually create our project. So let's go ahead and I'm using a GitHub repository for this. So this is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. You'll just go to new project here in the start page. I need to go to new project here, which will create a new solution. All right, so create a new solution, and it's going to be a monogame project. It's going to be a monogame Windows project. And I'm going to call this Flat Paddles Tutorial. Click OK. And then I'm going to double click that and open that solution, and there we go. So let's work on the structure for a bit. All right, so I'm going to create two folders, Entities and Screen. So right click the project and go to Add New Folder. Entities, and right click your project and go to Add New Folder. Screens. Okay, I am going to provide the PGL2D DLL as a reference that you can add. For those of you that do not care of how this is created, you can just straight up use this DLL. For those that want to know how to create this, I have the previous series covers that in detail. Now, this is using a newer .NET version of what our Flat Paddles tutorial defaults to. So let's right-click our project and go to Properties. And let's make this a little smaller. This defaults to .NET Framework 4. Let's change this to .NET Framework 4.5.2. If for some reason you do need to target .NET Framework 4, you can download the source code for PGL2D and change that target framework to .NET Framework 4. But they have to be the same for it to work right. Okay. Go ahead and close that. Now that we got this targeting the same framework as PGL2D, let's right-click References. Actually, let me go back to here. Let me copy this location. Let's right-click References in Visual Studio and hit Add Reference. And we're going to browse. Now I'm going to paste that location into the path at the top. Now I'm going to double-click PGL2D.dll. All right, that is checked, and then we hit OK. So now we click that. So it's looking at this specific path, D tutorial series yada 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 PGL2D.dll. It's set to copy local to true, so that is what we want. Okay, now let's go ahead and make this smaller, and let's save our project and go to Build, Rebuild Solution. Everything is good. If you did not change the .NET Framework, if it's still at 4, and you try to build your project, you would see this message. The primary reference PGL2D cannot be resolved because it was built against the .NET Framework version 4.5.2 framework. This is a higher version than the currently targeted framework, .NET Framework 4. Now, if you target .NET Framework 4.6.1 on your game and go to build, rebuild, it'll be fine. So you have to use at minimum what the PGL2D library is. If, again, for whatever reason, you need to target this framework version, .NET 4.0, you can load up the source code for PGL2D. It is in my GitHub repository. It is free. It's open source. Just download the source code. Change that target to .NET Framework 4, and you'll be good to go. So I'm going to set this back to 4.5.2. I like to keep things the same across everything. I don't like to mix framework versions. All right. So build and rebuild, and we're back in business because we do not have that error message, and that is done. Now, if we go back to that folder, if we go and look at that debug folder, that has all the DLLs we need to run our game, and including PGL2D. So we know it's working. All right, so let's get started with the first file, which is going to be the paddle control. That's going to be an enum. So go in your Solution Explorer and right-click Entities and go to Add Class. And we're going to call this paddle control. Paddle control. I'm going to make this very small. And instead of a class, it's going to be a public enum. Public enum paddle control. It's going to have two values, player, computer. All right, save this file. So what this is going to do is it's going to tell us in the code that this paddle is being controlled by the player and this paddle is being controlled by the computer. You can do this however way you want. You can have a Boolean value that just says, hey, this is computer controlled, true or false. It really doesn't matter which way you do this. So you can use a Boolean value if you prefer that. So that is the public enum paddle control to indicate that a paddle is either player controlled or computer controlled. All right, now let's load up the iPaddle interface. So right-click the Entities folder in your Solution Explorer and go to Add Class. And at the top here, select Interface. And we're going to set this up to be called iPaddle. iPaddle. It's going to be public interface. Public interface iPaddle. And I'm going to just rename the file because I deleted the dot instead on accident. Okay. So iPaddle, public interface iPaddle. That's just going to have one property, paddle control, what we just created before, paddle control, get. So sometimes your interfaces will be extremely short. In this case, only one property. But that's going to guarantee that any paddle we create that uses this interface is going to have a paddle control. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Please give a thumbs up or a like if you enjoyed this. Add a comment if you want to as well. Feel free to take this link and share it, put it on your own site, embed it, whatever you want to do. That's fine with me. Anything that I mentioned that you need resources, be sure to check the description below. There will be links for those. If I missed anything or if a link is dead, please post a comment or find a way to contact me. You can go to my website and use the contact form. Want to be sure that all the links are still live and going. So, stay tuned for the next video.